This story is titled, My Unfaithful Wife, Who Thought She Took All My Assets After Divorce, Unexpectedly Showed Up at My Door Demanding Money from My Secret Jackpot Fortune. But it was too late. She had already lost her millionaire. Hey Reddit, I want to start by telling you something important. No matter how smart or careful someone thinks they are, their arrogance will always trip them up. That's exactly what happened to my ex-wife Natalie, and I'm about to share how it all went down. Natalie and I had been married for 6 years. On paper, we had a decent life together. I had a stable job as a technical writer, while she worked as a freelance graphic designer. We weren't exactly rolling in money, but we were comfortable enough that we didn't have to worry about paying our bills each month. We had built what I thought was a reasonably good life. To everyone else, we probably looked like a pretty solid couple. But let me tell you something. I wasn't about to become one of those guys who finds out years later that they've been played for a fool. I've always been observant, and I started noticing little changes in Natalie's behavior that just didn't add up. Her schedule began getting increasingly erratic. She suddenly had client meetings that would only take place in the evenings, or she'd take hours to run simple errands that should have taken 30 minutes at most. I also noticed she started dressing up a lot more, wearing heels, putting on full makeup, the whole deal, even when she was supposedly just meeting a client for coffee. It seemed excessive for professional meetings, especially considering how casual she used to be about these things. And her phone? That thing became practically glued to her hand. I noticed she never left its screen up on the table anymore. Whenever she got notifications, she'd quickly grab it and check them with her body turned away from me. It was the kind of behavior that sets off alarm bells. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions without evidence, but I'm also not an idiot. Something clearly wasn't adding up in our relationship, and I felt a growing knot in my stomach every time I thought about what those signs might mean. I decided to test the waters one night. I casually asked her how her day went, inquiring about what her client wanted and other specific details about her supposed meeting. She gave me the vaguest answers possible, speaking in generalities without providing any concrete information. Then she quickly changed the subject, as if she couldn't get out of the conversation fast enough. I didn't push it that night, but I wasn't about to let it slide either. Her evasiveness only confirmed my suspicions that something was very wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started paying much closer attention to her behavior. She would leave the house to work at odd hours, but strangely, she didn't bring her laptop with her, an essential tool for a graphic designer. I also noticed changes in her social media presence. Her profiles started looking more like those of a single woman, with new selfies appearing regularly alongside vague captions about freedom and happiness. You know the type, the kind of posts people make when they're trying to send a message without saying it directly. The turning point came one evening when she left her laptop open on the coffee table. I wasn't snooping or specifically looking for anything incriminating. I was just moving it out of the way so I could set down some papers. But when I picked it up, I saw a message notification pop up on the screen. She had her iMessage linked to her laptop, and there it was, a text from someone named Trevor that simply read, "Last night was amazing." I could have gone nuclear right then and there, confronting her with what I'd seen. But that's not my style. I'm a planner by nature, and I wasn't about to give her the chance to twist the story or turn things around on me. So instead, I took a deep breath and opened the text conversation, hoping I was wrong, but knowing deep down that I probably wasn't. Sure enough, what I found was exactly what I had feared. The message thread between Natalie and Trevor went back at least 2 months, and it contained everything I needed to know. They discussed how they'd first met at a yoga class, detailed their secret meetups, and even talked about how Natalie was planning to leave me once the time was right. Reading through their conversations, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, disappointment. But most of all, I felt focused. This wasn't the time to lose my composure. I methodically forwarded all the messages to myself and took screenshots of everything, creating a folder full of evidence. I wasn't going to give Natalie even an inch of wiggle room to deny what she'd done or try to gaslight me about the situation. I needed concrete proof, and now I had it. The next day, I called a lawyer. I laid out the entire situation, showed him the evidence I had gathered, and asked what my options were. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He told me it was going to be a fight, especially since we didn't have a prenuptial agreement in place. But with the evidence of infidelity I had collected, we had a solid case for divorce on those grounds. I felt a strange sense of relief knowing I had a professional on my side who could help me navigate what was clearly going to be a difficult process. When I finally confronted Natalie, I didn't yell or lose my temper. I simply showed her the messages I had discovered and calmly asked, "So, when were you planning on telling me?" The look on her face was unforgettable. She froze for a split second, her eyes widening with the realization that she had been caught. Her first instinct was to deny everything, despite the irrefutable evidence right in front of her. When she realized denial wasn't going to work, she quickly switched tactics. She started blaming me for not being attentive enough or not making her feel appreciated. Classic deflection. I wasn't having any of it. I shut that down immediately by saying, "This isn't about me. It's about you, and you know it. We're done." Those words hung in the air between us, marking the end of our marriage with finality. That's when the real battle began. Natalie wasn't about to let me walk away from our marriage without making me pay for it in every way possible. She quickly lawyered up and came after me for everything she could get her hands on. Half my savings, our house, my car, and even part of my retirement fund. Her argument? That she had sacrificed so much for our marriage and deserved her share. The audacity was breathtaking, considering she was the one who had been carrying on an affair behind my back. The divorce process was absolute hell. Her lawyer tried every trick in the book to drag things out and make my life as miserable as possible. At one point, Natalie even claimed she needed more money because she had been supporting me emotionally while I built my career. I couldn't believe the things coming out of her mouth. This was the same woman who had been planning to leave me for her yoga instructor. The level of entitlement and manipulation was staggering. My lawyer continued to reassure me that I had a good chance of keeping most of what I'd worked for if we took the case to court. With the evidence of her infidelity, we had a strong position. But after months of back and forth, endless negotiations, and the constant stress of fighting, I made a difficult choice. I decided to let her have what she wanted. It wasn't because I thought she deserved it, but because the mental toll of continuing the battle just wasn't worth it anymore. I needed to move on with my life, even if it meant starting over with almost nothing. The day the divorce was finalized felt surreal. On one hand, I felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was finally free from Natalie's lies and manipulation. On the other hand, I was now essentially broke, having given up most of my assets in the settlement. But despite everything, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was free, and that freedom was worth more than any material possession. At the time, I had no idea just how much karma was about to come back around, but I was about to find out. After the divorce, my life boiled down to two simple things: work and survival. Starting over from scratch wasn't just some cliché phrase for me. It was my new reality. At 37 years old, I found myself living in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, with furniture I'd either picked up at thrift stores or literally dragged in from the curb. My once comfortable life, complete with a house I loved and a car I took pride in, was gone. But honestly, I was too determined to rebuild to waste time dwelling on what I'd lost. The apartment wasn't much to look at, if I'm being honest. It had scuffed floors that had seen better days decades ago, a kitchen so small it could barely fit two people standing side by side, and neighbors who apparently thought 2 a.m. was the perfect time to hold karaoke competitions. My living room consisted of a futon I found on Craigslist for next to nothing, and a TV that only worked if you banged it on the side just right. The walls were completely bare, the fridge was mostly empty save for some essentials, but there was one thing about that tiny apartment that made it valuable to me. It was mine. No Natalie, no Trevor, no constant reminders of how badly I'd been screwed over. Just a clean slate. I threw myself into my work with a determination I hadn't felt in years. My job as a technical writer wasn't particularly glamorous or exciting, but it paid the bills, and I was good at it. I picked up every extra shift I could get my hands on, taking on freelance gigs in what little free time I had left. My weekdays blurred into weekends, and I rarely took a day off. Sleep became optional, a luxury I couldn't always afford if I wanted to make ends meet. It wasn't the healthiest way to live, and I knew that, but I had a goal that kept me going: to rebuild my savings and prove to myself that I could not only survive, but thrive without Natalie or anyone else. The first few months were undeniably tough. My bank account was laughable, and I was constantly exhausted from working so much. I'd often find myself sitting down after a 12-hour workday, staring at the pile of bills on my coffee table, and wondering how the hell I'd gotten to this point in my life. But then I'd remind myself that I was free. No more Natalie telling me I wasn't good enough. No more pretending everything was fine while she lived a double life right under my nose. That thought alone was usually enough to get me back on my feet and pushing forward. One thing I realized quickly during this time was how little I actually needed to be content. When you're stripped down to the basics, you figure out pretty fast what's really important. I didn't need fancy clothes or a new car or a perfectly decorated apartment to feel like I was living a worthwhile life. I needed a roof over my head, food on the table, and the drive to keep moving forward. It was almost liberating to let go of all the material crap Natalie had been so obsessed with accumulating during our marriage. Of course, social media didn't make this mental shift easy. Natalie and Trevor were constantly posting pictures of themselves living it up, or at least that's what they wanted everyone to think. Photos of them lounging by the pool at what used to be my house, smiling next to what used to be my car, and acting like their relationship was some kind of aspirational hash goals regularly popped up in my feed. I could have blocked her accounts, and sometimes I considered it, but part of me wanted to see how it all played out. I knew it wouldn't last. People like Natalie and Trevor were built to self-destruct. Sure enough, the cracks in their perfect facade started to show. Mutual friends began telling me that Trevor wasn't exactly the responsible, loving guy Natalie had made him out to be. Apparently, he had quit his job at the gym and was spending most of his time partying and burning through Natalie's money. Or more accurately, the money she'd gotten from our divorce settlement. She was footing the bill for everything: groceries, utilities, even his bar tabs when he went out with friends. The house she'd fought so hard for during our divorce? It was already falling into disrepair, because neither of them could be bothered to maintain it properly. The car she'd insisted was essential to her well-being? Trevor had crashed it into a mailbox within 6 months of getting his hands on it. I'll admit, hearing about their downfall gave me a certain satisfaction. Okay, maybe more than a little satisfaction, but I didn't dwell on it for too long. I had my own life to focus on, and for the first time in years, I was starting to see real progress. One of the first big milestones came when I finally paid off all my debts. Between the divorce and Natalie draining our joint accounts before I could stop her, I'd been left with a mountain of credit card bills and a couple of lingering loans that seemed insurmountable at first. It took months of scrimping and saving, cutting corners wherever possible, but one by one I knocked them out. The day I made the final payment on the last outstanding debt, I celebrated with a cheap frozen pizza and a 6-hour binge of my favorite show. It wasn't a glamorous celebration by any means, but it felt damn good to know I was finally back in control of my finances. Next came rebuilding my savings from scratch. I set up a strict budget for myself, cutting out anything that wasn't absolutely necessary for survival. No eating out, no impulse purchases, no splurging on things I didn't really need. I became the king of meal prepping, eating the same rotation of chicken, rice, and vegetables week after week. It wasn't the most exciting culinary experience, but it worked. Slowly but surely, my bank account started to grow again, and with it, my confidence in my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. Around this time, I also started taking better care of myself physically and mentally. The divorce had taken a serious toll on both my mental and physical health, and I was tired of feeling like crap all the time. I joined a local gym, definitely not Trevor's, obviously, and started working out a few times a week. It wasn't about getting revenge or looking better than Trevor, although I can't deny that thought crossed my mind occasionally. It was primarily about feeling stronger and more confident in myself, regaining the self-assurance that had been shaken during the divorce. Work was another area where I saw huge personal growth during this period. All those extra shifts and freelance gigs started to pay off, not just financially, but professionally as well. I built up a solid reputation in my field as someone reliable who consistently delivered quality work. After about a year of this grind, I landed a promotion at my main job. The pay increase wasn't exactly life-changing, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. More importantly, it was validation that I was capable of standing on my own 2 feet and building something for myself. As I started to feel more financially stable, I allowed myself to indulge in a few small luxuries that I had denied myself during the strictest phase of my budget. I upgraded my futon to an actual couch that didn't make my back ache every morning. I bought a decent coffee maker that didn't sound like it was about to explode every time I used it. I even treated myself to a weekend trip out of town. Nothing extravagant, just a change of scenery to clear my head. These weren't major expenses by any means, but they were enough to remind myself that life wasn't just about work and survival. I was allowed to enjoy it too. By the end of that first year post-divorce, I was in a completely different place, financially, emotionally, and mentally. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually thriving in my new life. I had rebuilt my savings, advanced in my career, improved my health, and most importantly, regained my self-confidence. As for Natalie and Trevor, things didn't end well for them, to put it mildly. From what I heard through our mutual friends, Trevor had completely drained Natalie's savings, maxed out her credit cards, and then left her high and dry once the money ran out. She lost the house, the car, and pretty much everything she'd taken from me in the divorce. Karma works fast sometimes, but honestly, I didn't care about them anymore. My focus was entirely on myself and the life I was rebuilding from the ground up. I wasn't rich or living some Instagram-worthy dream life by any means, but I was genuinely happy with where I was. And that was more than enough for me. I'd learned that I didn't need Natalie, a fancy house, or a flashy car to feel successful or fulfilled. All I needed was my own drive and determination to keep moving forward. The best part? I did it all without Natalie's drama or toxicity dragging me down. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in complete control of my own life, and that feeling was worth every struggle I'd been through to get there. One Friday after work, I was running some errands around town and stopped at a gas station to fill up my car. While standing in line to pay for a soda, I noticed a bright display of lottery tickets next to the register. Normally, I wouldn't give those a second glance. I've never been the type of guy to waste money on such long shots, especially after working so hard to get my finances in order. But for whatever reason, something compelled me to say, why not, and grab a ticket. I stuffed it in my jacket pocket and didn't think about it again for the rest of the day. The weekend came and went, filled with the usual routines, and the lottery ticket was all but forgotten. A few days later, I was scrolling through my phone while eating dinner when I saw a headline about an unclaimed lottery jackpot. The winning ticket had been sold at a gas station in my city. My heart skipped a beat as I jumped up from the table, rummaged through my jacket, and pulled out the crumpled ticket I had purchased on a whim. I wasn't expecting anything to come of it. It was just a silly impulse buy after all. But when I pulled up the winning numbers online and compared them to my ticket, I nearly dropped my phone in shock. Every single number matched perfectly. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the ticket and refreshing the website to make sure I wasn't seeing things. This kind of thing doesn't happen to regular people like me. I mean, who actually wins the lottery in real life? But there it was, the evidence right in front of me. The next morning, I took the ticket to the lottery office to get official confirmation. They ran the numbers, and sure enough, it was real. After taxes, I was looking at approximately $10 million. $10 million. My brain couldn't even process that amount at first. It was more money than I had ever imagined having in my lifetime. I didn't tell a soul about my win initially. I didn't want to be that stereotypical lottery winner who blows it all on stupid stuff and ends up broke again within a year. I've read too many of those cautionary tales. Instead, I did something that, in retrospect, was probably the smartest decision I've ever made. I took my time and did my research. I hired a reputable financial advisor and an attorney before even claiming the prize. They helped me set up a trust that allowed me to claim the money anonymously, protecting me from the media circus and the inevitable parade of long-lost friends and relatives that come crawling out of the woodwork when they smell money. Once the money hit my account, I sat down with my financial team and made a comprehensive plan. I was determined not to become one of those sad stories you hear about. The lottery winner who loses everything because they went wild with spending and had nothing to show for it a few years later. My advisor helped me put the bulk of the winnings into diverse investments and high-yield accounts. I made a firm decision that I wasn't going to touch that money unless I absolutely needed to. This was my one shot at long-term financial security, and I wasn't about to squander it. I did allow myself a few reasonable upgrades to my living situation, though. First, I moved out of my tiny apartment and bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. Nothing extravagant or flashy, just a 3-bedroom place with a nice yard and plenty of space to call my own. It felt incredibly good to have a home that was truly mine and mine alone, with no memories of Natalie or lingering bitterness attached to it. Next, I replaced my beat-up old sedan with a new, reliable car. Again, I didn't go for anything overly flashy or attention-grabbing. I simply wanted something comfortable and dependable that wouldn't break down on me in the middle of winter. It was a sensible purchase, not a status symbol. I also bought a few nice things for the house. A comfortable bed with a good mattress, a decent couch, and some quality kitchen appliances. After years of sleeping on secondhand furniture and making do with whatever I could find for cheap, these purchases felt like the height of luxury. But that was it. No extravagant vacations to exotic locations. No designer clothes filling my closet. No fancy watches or other status symbols. I didn't need any of that superficial stuff to feel successful or complete. What I needed was peace of mind, and for the first time in years, I had it in abundance. The weirdest part about winning the lottery wasn't the money itself. It was the freedom that came with it. I didn't have to stress about bills anymore or work overtime just to get by. I could breathe. That kind of security is something I hadn't felt in a long time, and it completely changed my perspective on life. Suddenly, I could focus on what I wanted to do rather than what I had to do just to survive. I also decided to give back in small, meaningful ways. I donated to a few local charities that were doing good work in the community. I helped out some friends who were struggling financially, covering medical bills or school expenses without making a big deal about it. None of these contributions put even a tiny dent in my savings, but they made a significant difference in other people's lives. It felt good to share my good fortune without making a spectacle of my generosity. For the most part, I kept my lottery win completely under wraps. I told my best friend Ryan because I trusted him completely and knew he wouldn't treat me differently or spread the news around. But I didn't even tell my extended family. People act weird when they find out you have money. Relationships change, expectations shift, and suddenly you're not sure if people like you for who you are or for what you can give them. I wasn't about to invite that kind of chaos into my life now that I had finally found some peace. Life after the win was quiet and simple, just the way I liked it. I still worked part-time as a technical writer, mostly because I enjoyed the work and wanted to keep busy with something productive. I spent my free time fixing up my house, going to the gym regularly, and enjoying my newfound stability without drawing attention to myself. I was living comfortably but frugally, considering what I could actually afford if I wanted to show off. Winning the lottery didn't transform me into a different person overnight. It didn't magically solve all my problems or make my life perfect. But it did give me the chance to start over completely on my own terms, without the financial stress that had been weighing me down for so long. And for that unexpected gift, I was immensely grateful. Little did I know that my past wasn't quite as far behind me as I thought. But for the time being, I was just happy to be in a place where I could live my life without any drama or complications. Or so I naively believed at the time. Let me tell you, nothing ruins a perfectly good afternoon quite like seeing your cheating ex-wife standing in your driveway, leaning against a rental car like she has every right to be there. I almost didn't recognize Natalie at first. It had been over a year since I'd last seen her in person, and life clearly hadn't been kind to her in the interim. Her once carefully put-together appearance had deteriorated noticeably. She was dressed well enough, but there was something forced about it, like she was trying to fake the confidence and success she used to wear so effortlessly. This wasn't the first time I'd heard from Natalie recently either. A couple of weeks before her surprise appearance, she had sent me a random Facebook message that simply said, "Hey, how have you been?" I didn't even bother to respond. After everything she had put me through, the last thing I wanted was to open that door again and invite her drama back into my life. Then came the phone calls from unknown numbers ringing at odd hours. I ignored them all, figuring it was probably her trying to reach me through different phones when I wouldn't answer her messages. The thing about Natalie is that she doesn't give up easily, especially when she thinks there's something to gain. As it turned out, I was absolutely right about that. So there she was, standing uninvited and unwelcome in my driveway, flashing me a smile as if we were old friends catching up after a brief separation. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I opened the front door just far enough to step outside and positioned myself to block her view of the interior of my house. "Natalie, what do you want?" I asked bluntly, not bothering to hide my irritation. She tilted her head in that calculated way she always did when trying to appear casual and innocent. "Can't I just stop by to catch up? It's been so long," she replied, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I crossed my arms over my chest, making my closed-off body language crystal clear. "We don't have anything to catch up on. Say what you came to say and leave," she sighed dramatically, dropping the friendly act almost immediately when she realized it wasn't working. "Fine. I heard you've been doing well for yourself. Rumor has it you hit the lottery." And there it was. The real reason for her sudden interest in reconnecting. I don't know how she found out about my windfall. It was probably through mutual acquaintances or social media whispers, despite my efforts to keep it quiet. But the moment she said those words, I knew exactly why she had tracked me down. Natalie wouldn't just show up out of nostalgia or genuine interest in my well-being. She had caught the scent of money, and like a shark detecting blood in the water, she wanted a piece of it. Even if that's true, I said, keeping my tone as even and emotionless as possible, it has nothing to do with you. We're divorced, remember? She shrugged as if my statement was merely a minor technicality. I'm just saying we were married for years. Don't you think I'm entitled to something? After all, I supported you through so much. I almost laughed out loud at the sheer audacity of her claim. Supported me? This woman had taken half of everything I owned in the divorce, including the house and car I had worked so hard for, then promptly moved her affair partner in and ran through all that money. And now she was standing here trying to claim she deserved more? But I wasn't about to waste my energy arguing with her or showing how absurd I found her suggestion. You're not entitled to a thing, I replied calmly. Whatever I have now, I earned after the divorce. You got what you wanted back then. Don't push your luck. Her practiced smile faltered momentarily, and for a brief second, I thought she might actually back down and accept that she wasn't going to get anything more from me. But this was Natalie we're talking about. She doesn't quit until she's either gotten her way or made a complete fool of herself trying. Well, I think we should talk about it, she said, taking a step closer to me. Maybe over dinner or coffee we could figure out something that works for both of us. The suggestion came with a smile that I assumed was meant to be charming or persuasive. I shook my head firmly. There's nothing to figure out. You should leave. Her expression hardened instantly, and she dropped any pretense of friendliness. I'm not leaving until we've sorted this out, she insisted, her tone now demanding rather than cajoling. That's when I realized she wasn't just fishing randomly on the off chance I might give her something. She was planning something more calculated. Natalie wasn't the type to show her cards so clearly unless she believed she had a winning hand. I didn't know exactly what her angle was yet, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't about to let her worm her way back into my life or my finances. Leave now or I'm calling the cops, I stated firmly, already reaching for my phone in my pocket. She scoffed dramatically, clearly not expecting such a direct threat. Fine, but this isn't over, she said, as she turned and strutted back to her rental car. She drove off, but I knew with absolute certainty that she'd be back. Natalie didn't know when to quit, especially when she thought there was something valuable in it for her. Sure enough, over the next few days, she bombarded me with texts and emails. She tried every manipulative tactic in her considerable arsenal. Guilt trips, nostalgia, flattery, veiled threats. One particularly audacious text actually said, I was there for you when you were nothing. Don't you think you owe me something? I ignored every single message, saving them all but never responding. Blocking her number didn't help either. She just switched to emailing me instead. I started keeping a record of everything she sent, just in case I needed evidence of harassment later. My instincts told me this situation was going to get worse before it got better. Then came the second unannounced visit. This time, Natalie didn't even bother pretending to be nice. She showed up on my porch with a determined look on her face and demanded to talk. The fake pleasantries were completely gone. I'm serious, she said, her voice cold and calculating. We need to settle this. If you don't want to do it the easy way, I'll have to take legal action. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious about what possible legal grounds she thought she had. Legal action on what grounds? We've been divorced for over a year now, Natalie. You've got nothing. She smirked at me then, a self-satisfied expression that made it clear she thought she had me cornered. Oh, I think I do. There are laws about assets acquired during marriage, you know. If you bought that lottery ticket while we were still married, I'm entitled to half. Her logic was as flawed as her sense of entitlement, but I wasn't about to let her see me sweat. I knew the timeline was firmly on my side. Good luck with that, I said simply, and then shut the door in her face. I spent the rest of the day fuming about her audacity. Natalie clearly didn't care about the truth or the law. She only cared about what she could get. And if she thought she had even the slightest chance of grabbing a portion of my lottery winnings, she wasn't going to stop until she had exhausted every possible avenue. That's when I decided to call my attorney, Amanda. I explained the entire situation to her. Natalie's sudden reappearance, her threats, her claim about the lottery ticket potentially being purchased during our marriage. Amanda assured me that Natalie didn't have a legal leg to stand on. The timeline is clear, Amanda explained confidently. You bought and claimed the ticket well after the divorce was finalized. She can try to make a case, but it won't hold up in court. Still, I knew Natalie well enough to know that she wasn't rational when it came to getting what she wanted, and she certainly didn't back down easily. I told Amanda to start preparing a defense, just in case Natalie actually followed through on her threats. Better to be over-prepared than caught off guard. A few days later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found a courier with court papers. I had been served. It was ridiculous and exactly the kind of stunt I'd expected from Natalie, but it was happening nonetheless. She had actually filed a lawsuit claiming that my lottery winnings were marital assets I had hidden during our divorce. As frustrating as it was to be dragged into a legal battle over something so patently absurd, I wasn't worried about the outcome. I had Amanda on my side, and we had all the facts and documentation to prove that Natalie's claim was completely baseless. But that didn't mean it wasn't going to be an uphill battle. Natalie was determined to make my life as difficult as possible, and I wasn't about to let her win. The real fight was just beginning, but if she thought she could bully or manipulate me into giving her even a dime of my money, she was in for a rude awakening. Walking into a courthouse to face your ex-spouse in a legal battle is a surreal experience, to say the least. It's like being forcibly dragged back into the worst parts of your life, but with an audience watching your every move. The day of the hearing, I showed up early with my lawyer Amanda. She was calm and collected as always, reviewing our documentation one last time and reassuring me that we had absolutely nothing to worry about from a legal standpoint. Natalie, on the other hand, made her entrance like she was auditioning for some kind of reality TV show. She was all dolled up, wearing heels that clicked loudly with each step and echoed through the hallway. She had this smug look on her face, like she'd already won the case before it even began. Her lawyer followed right behind her, frantically flipping through a folder full of what I could only assume was a hastily assembled pile of nonsense they'd concocted to support their flimsy case. The courtroom itself was smaller than I had expected, based on the dramatic court scenes you see in movies and TV shows. There was no grand jury box or packed gallery of spectators, just a judge, a court reporter taking notes, and a handful of people present for the proceedings. Natalie sat on one side of the room with her lawyer, occasionally glancing over at me with what I imagine she thought was an intimidating stare. I sat on the opposite side with Amanda, focusing on remaining calm and composed despite the absurdity of the situation. The judge opened the hearing by reviewing the basic facts of the case. Natalie's claim, as presented by her lawyer, was that my lottery winnings constituted marital assets that I had deliberately hidden during our divorce proceedings, thereby depriving her of her rightful share. Her lawyer argued with surprising conviction that I had intentionally concealed the lottery ticket, presenting it as some kind of calculated scheme to cheat Natalie out of what she was legally entitled to. When it was Amanda's turn to respond, she methodically dismantled their argument piece by piece with the precision of a skilled surgeon. She explained to the judge that the lottery ticket had been purchased and claimed long after our divorce was finalized. She then handed the judge official documentation from the Lottery Commission that clearly showed the exact dates when the ticket was purchased and when the winnings were claimed. Both dates were well after our divorce had been legally completed. Amanda didn't stop there. She proceeded to present my financial records, demonstrating how the deposit from the lottery winnings occurred months after the divorce and was completely separate from any joint accounts that Natalie and I had maintained during our marriage. The judge nodded thoughtfully while reviewing the documentation, taking in all the evidence. I could tell Natalie's lawyer was beginning to look uncomfortable, but he clearly wasn't going to give up that easily on what would be a substantial payday if they somehow won. Next, Natalie herself took the stand. She put on quite a performance, giving a tearful speech about how difficult our marriage had supposedly been for her, how much she had sacrificed for my benefit, and how betrayed she felt when she discovered I had won the lottery after our divorce. It was pure theatrics, designed to appeal to emotion rather than facts. At one point, she even dramatically declared, "I trusted him, and he kept this secret from me. I don't think I'll ever recover from that kind of deception." I had to fight to keep my expression neutral as I listened to her performance. Recover from what exactly? She wasn't recovering from anything I had done to her. She was trying to recover financially from the consequences of her own actions, primarily allowing Trevor to drain her dry after our divorce. But of course, she conveniently left that part out of her testimony. When Amanda cross-examined her, things got significantly more interesting. Amanda started by confirming the timeline of events with surgical precision. "Natalie, your divorce was finalized on this specific date, correct?" Amanda asked, pointing to the official court document. Natalie nodded reluctantly. "And you've seen the documentation showing that the lottery ticket was purchased after that date, haven't you?" Amanda continued, her tone professional but relentless. Natalie tried to hedge her response, saying, "I don't know for certain when he bought it. For all I know, he could have purchased it while we were still married and just waited to claim it after the divorce was final." Amanda didn't miss a beat. "Are you suggesting that the Lottery Commission would falsify their records to align with my client's timeline?" she asked pointedly. Natalie stammered, clearly caught off guard by the direct challenge to her implication. I'm not saying that, but what? Amanda pressed firmly. The evidence is clear, and you've seen it yourself. There is no overlap between your marriage and the lottery winnings. Isn't that correct? With no plausible alternative, Natalie had no choice but to admit the truth. Yes, she muttered, her voice barely audible in the quiet courtroom. Amanda wasn't done yet. She systematically highlighted how Natalie had already received a significant settlement in our divorce, including our house, my car, and a substantial portion of my savings at the time. You've already benefited financially from the divorce settlement, haven't you? Amanda asked. Natalie tried once again to position herself as the victim, claiming she had been forced to use that money just to survive after our divorce. She conveniently omitted any mention of Trevor or how the money had actually been spent. So, Amanda continued, her voice remaining measured but pointed, you're asking this court to award you additional money despite having no legal claim to it, simply because you spent through your settlement? The courtroom fell completely silent at this question. Even Natalie's lawyer looked like he was regretting taking on her case at this point. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my statement straightforward and factual. I told the judge about the timing of the ticket purchase, how I had gone through all the proper legal channels to claim the winnings, and how I had been trying to move forward with my life after the divorce when Natalie suddenly reappeared demanding money she had no right to. I explained how I had made every effort to keep the separation clean and fair, despite the circumstances that led to it, and how this lawsuit felt like yet another attempt to take advantage of me. The judge listened attentively to both sides and then asked if either party had any final arguments to present. Natalie's lawyer gave a half-hearted speech about marital contributions and moral obligations that sounded hollow even to my untrained ear. It was clear he didn't have much substance to work with given the clear timeline of events. When the judge finally delivered his decision, I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders. He dismissed Natalie's case as completely baseless, and even went so far as to warn her against filing frivolous lawsuits in the future. He also took the unusual step of reprimanding her lawyer for bringing such a weak case to court in the first place. Natalie's reaction was exactly what I expected. Her face turned an angry shade of red, and she clenched her jaw so tightly I thought she might crack a tooth. I could tell she was barely containing her rage, and I half expected her to start screaming right there in the courtroom. Somehow she managed to hold it together, but just barely. The whole ordeal had been stressful and completely unnecessary, but in the end, justice prevailed. Natalie had tried to take something that didn't belong to her and had been shut down in the most public and definitive way possible. You'd think after such a clear and humiliating loss in court, Natalie would have finally gotten the message and moved on with her life. But no. Natalie, being Natalie, decided she wasn't going down without launching one final desperate attack. As soon as the ruling was announced and we stepped outside the courthouse, there she was, waiting for me in the parking lot. Her face was contorted with rage as she screamed, "You'll regret this, Ethan! You think this is over? I'll ruin you!" I didn't respond with a single word. I simply looked at her, shrugged my shoulders indifferently, and walked to my car. Engaging with her tantrum wouldn't have accomplished anything except giving her the attention and drama she so desperately craved. Besides, I had much bigger plans in mind. Here's the thing about Natalie that I had come to understand all too well. She's utterly predictable. She thrives on creating chaos around her and genuinely believes she's smarter than everyone else in the room. But the truth? She's not nearly as clever as she thinks she is, and I was about to prove it definitively. I knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't going to let this go. Despite losing in court and having no legal avenue to pursue, she would try something else. So I decided it was time to teach her a lesson she would never forget. One that would end her attempts to manipulate and exploit me once and for all. Over the next week, I carefully began planting seeds through a few mutual acquaintances. I casually mentioned that I was looking into a high-profile real estate investment opportunity, specifically a luxury condo project that was supposedly going to be the next big thing in Chicago's booming property market. Of course, there was no such project. It was a complete fabrication that Amanda and I had carefully constructed specifically to bait Natalie. Predictably, word got back to her through the grapevine. It didn't take long before she reached out through one of those same mutual contacts, claiming she might be interested in partnering with me on this imaginary real estate deal. She played it off like she was doing me some kind of favor, saying she had valuable connections in the real estate world and could help make the project happen. The audacity was almost impressive. I pretended to be interested in her offer, telling her I was intrigued by the possibility of working together. I said I would set up a meeting with the project's developers to discuss the potential partnership. What Natalie didn't know was that these developers were actually Amanda and one of her legal colleagues posing as executives from a fictional real estate development company. When the day of the meeting arrived, Natalie came dressed to impress, acting every bit the part of a high-powered investor. She dropped all the industry buzzwords, ROI, equity stakes, market trends, clearly trying to convince us that she knew what she was talking about. The most interesting part was when she produced several financial documents that supposedly proved she had the capital to back up her investment promises. She presented bank statements and letters of credit with a confidence that was almost convincing. If you didn't know the truth about her financial situation, this was exactly the scenario we had been waiting for. Amanda and her colleague played their roles perfectly, asking probing questions and pretending to be impressed by Natalie's credentials and financial documentation. Meanwhile, I sat back quietly and let her dig herself deeper and deeper into the hole she was creating. By the end of the meeting, Natalie was practically glowing with self-satisfaction. She probably thought she had successfully pulled one over on us and was about to secure a slice of this made-up real estate venture. She had no idea what was actually coming her way. After the meeting concluded, Amanda and I carefully reviewed the documents Natalie had provided. They were laughably amateur in their fabrication, poorly doctored bank statements, forged letters of credit, and a collection of completely fictional claims about her assets and financial standing. It wasn't just misleading, it was outright fraud, plain and simple. We took everything directly to the authorities, who were surprisingly eager to get involved. Fraud cases like this, with clear documentation and evidence, are apparently their bread and butter. Natalie had unwittingly handed them all the evidence they needed to build a case against her, neatly packaged on a silver platter. A few weeks later, Natalie was arrested. From what I heard through mutual connections, she was completely blindsided by the whole thing. She had no idea that the investment opportunity had been an elaborate sting operation designed to expose her fraudulent behavior until the handcuffs were being placed on her wrists. The fallout was nothing short of spectacular. Natalie was formally charged with fraud, forgery, and several other related crimes. Her poorly fabricated financial documents and her transparent attempt to manipulate her way into the non-existent deal made the case against her virtually airtight. Her lawyer tried desperately to argue that she had been misled or somehow tricked into the situation, but the evidence against her was simply overwhelming. The court didn't take a lenient approach either. She was hit with substantial fines, placed on probation, and sentenced to a significant amount of mandatory community service. But perhaps worst of all for someone like Natalie, her reputation was completely and irreparably destroyed. Word spread quickly throughout her social and professional circles, and she went from pretending to be a savvy investor to becoming the punchline of everyone's jokes practically overnight. I can't lie. It was incredibly satisfying to watch her carefully constructed facade finally crumble completely. After years of her manipulating, lying, and scheming her way through life, she'd finally been caught red-handed and held accountable for her actions. This wasn't just about the money or the fake investment opportunity. It was about showing her that she couldn't keep walking all over people without eventually facing consequences for her behavior. For me, it was the perfect form of revenge. I didn't have to scream or fight or sink to her level of pettiness. I simply let her own greed and arrogance do all the heavy lifting for me. She genuinely thought she could outsmart me one last time. And in the end, she only succeeded in outsmarting herself. After the case was fully wrapped up, Natalie tried to reach out to me one final time. She sent me a long, rambling email full of excuses and justifications for her actions. She blamed everyone but herself for what had happened, claiming she'd been pushed into a corner and didn't have any other choice. The most absurd part was when she actually had the nerve to ask if I could help her out financially, just until things settled down. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't need to. She had made her bed through years of selfish choices and manipulative behavior, and now she finally had to lie in it. My silence said everything that needed to be said. The whole ordeal taught me a lot, not just about Natalie, but about myself as well. I realized that walking away from someone as toxic as her was the best decision I had ever made. Winning the lottery had certainly changed my life for the better, but the real prize was being completely free of her toxicity and knowing that I had come out on top, despite how hard she had tried to drag me down. Natalie had threatened to ruin me, but in the end, all she managed to do was ruin herself. And honestly, I'm perfectly fine with how things turned out. Looking back on everything now, it's strange to think about how different my life is compared to just a few years ago. I went from being married to someone who betrayed me in the worst way possible, to losing almost everything in the divorce, to rebuilding my life from scratch, to unexpectedly winning the lottery, and finally to watching karma catch up with the person who had hurt me so deeply. Through it all, I learned that material possessions aren't what make you wealthy. It's your character, your resilience, and your ability to stand on your own 2 feet, even when life knocks you down. The money from the lottery is certainly nice, and I'm grateful for the security it provides, but I know that even without it, I would have been okay. I had already proven to myself that I could rebuild from nothing once. If necessary, I could do it again. I still keep my lifestyle relatively modest. I don't flash my wealth or try to impress people with what I have. I focus on the relationships and activities that bring genuine meaning to my life. I volunteer regularly at local charities. I've reconnected with old friends who stood by me during the divorce, and I've even started dating again, cautiously, but with an open heart. As for Natalie, I hear she eventually moved to another state to escape the humiliation of her legal troubles and ruined reputation. Some mutual friends tell me she's trying to reinvent herself with a new crowd who doesn't know her history. Part of me hopes she's learned something from everything that happened, but I know better than to expect people to change fundamentally. Some people just never learn. What I do know is that I've finally closed that chapter of my life completely. I don't check up on her, I don't think about her much, and I certainly don't harbor any lingering resentment. Life is too short to carry that kind of negativity around, especially when I have so much to be grateful for now. If there's a lesson in all of this, I suppose it's that karma might take its time, but it usually arrives eventually. And when it does, it's best to be on the right side of it. I'm just glad I was patient enough to see it all play out. These days, I wake up each morning with a sense of peace that I never thought I'd find again after everything that happened. I'm not saying my life is perfect, no one's is, but I've found my own version of happiness. And at the end of the day, that's what matters most. So if you're going through something similar, if you've been betrayed or taken advantage of by someone you trusted, know that it does get better. It may not happen overnight, and your path probably won't include a convenient lottery win like mine did. But if you focus on rebuilding your life one day at a time, you'll eventually find yourself in a better place than you ever imagined possible. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about moving forward and creating a life so good that the people who hurt you become nothing more than a distant memory, a lesson learned along the way to something better.